Welcome back to Whispers of Wisdom, a channel where great books are not rushed, simplified, or softened, but explored slowly, honestly, and with depth. Here, we don't just explain texts, we listen to them, wrestle with them, and allow them to question who we are becoming. In this ongoing series, we are traveling through Friedrich Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra, a work divided into 4 major parts, each one pushing further into self-overcoming, responsibility, and creative strength. This book is not meant to be consumed casually. It is meant to be lived with. In this 5th video, we complete part 1, covering chapters 18 through 22. These chapters confront some of the most intimate and serious themes in Zarathustra's, teaching desire and illusion, injury and pride, creation and responsibility, death and dignity, and finally, the highest form of virtue, the virtue that gives not out of duty, but out of abundance. This is the turning point. The foundations are laid. What follows will be sharper, darker, and more demanding. This is Whispers of Wisdom, and this is Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Part 1, Chapters 18 to 22. Chapter 18, Old and Young Women. Zarathustra now steps into dangerous territory, not because of hostility, but because of misunderstanding. This chapter has been quoted carelessly, judged hastily, and weaponized without context. But Zarathustra is not speaking here about gender in any simple sense. He is speaking about power, desire, illusion, and projection, using men and women as symbolic mirrors of deeper instincts. To read this chapter literally is to miss its meaning entirely. Zarathustra begins by addressing old women not as a biological category, but as figures of experience, tradition, and long observation of desire. They represent knowledge accumulated through proximity to life's patterns, especially the patterns of attraction, control, and illusion. He listens to them and then reflects what they have learned. The old women speak of love, marriage, and desire not romantically, but realistically. They see how ideals collapse under proximity, how passion fades, how power dynamics shift beneath promises. Zarathustra does not mock this wisdom. He acknowledges it, but he also sees its danger. Experience can sharpen perception or harden it. Those who have seen love fail too often may begin to believe it cannot succeed. Disappointment can turn into cynicism. Protection becomes mistrust. Wisdom becomes resignation. Zarathustra resists this. He does not deny the risks of desire, but he refuses to surrender to them. He speaks next of young women, symbols not of innocence, but of potential, illusion, and becoming. They represent possibility before it has been tested, desire before it has been shaped, ideals before they have collided with reality. Zarathustra sees something important here. Youth carries power, not because it knows more, but because it believes more. Belief itself is force. Illusion can move mountains, but it can also blind. This is where Zarathustra introduces one of the most controversial ideas in the chapter: the tension between truth and illusion in desire. He suggests that attraction is not built on truth alone, but on appearance, projection, and imagination. People do not love the other as they are. They love what they see, hope, or invent. This is not condemnation. It is observation. Love often begins in illusion and matures only if it survives truth. Zarathustra warns that those who demand absolute honesty at the beginning of desire often kill it prematurely. But those who cling to illusion forever never reach depth. Desire must evolve, or it decays. He also speaks of power in relationships, again, not politically, but instinctually. Desire involves influence, attraction, and vulnerability. To pretend otherwise is naive. Zarathustra does not moralize this dynamic. He exposes it. He sees how people deny power while secretly exercising it, how they pretend innocence while manipulating affection, how they claim devotion while demanding control. This dishonesty disgusts him. He would rather see honest struggle than polite deception. The famous line, often ripped from context, about women and the whip is not instruction, not endorsement, and not literal. It is symbolic, pointing to the dangerous reciprocal tension between desire and domination when instincts are unexamined. Zarathustra is not telling anyone how to behave. He is warning what happens when instincts are unconscious. When desire is not mastered, it turns into games of control. When attraction lacks discipline, it becomes cruelty disguised as romance. This chapter is not misogyny. It is psychology. Zarathustra is equally critical of men. He sees how men romanticize, idealize, and project fantasies onto others, and then punish them for failing to match the illusion. He sees how men seek possession instead of understanding, how they confuse desire with entitlement. Both sides are trapped when desire is unconscious. Zarathustra's deeper message is this: love without self-mastery becomes domination or submission. Love with self-mastery becomes creation. He does not reject love. He demands more from it. He wants relationships where two strong wills meet, not where one dissolves into the other, where desire sharpens, becoming rather than replacing it. Zarathustra speaks finally of marriage, not as institution, but as commitment. He asks, does this union strengthen both? Does it create future? Does it demand growth? If not, it is merely companionship against loneliness, and loneliness always returns. He ends the chapter without comfort, because this subject allows none. Desire is dangerous. Love is risky. Illusion is powerful. But Zarathustra refuses fear-based morality. He does not say avoid. He says no. Know your instincts. Know your projections. Know your hunger for power, comfort, and validation. Only then can love become honest. Only then can desire become creative. Only then can union avoid decay. This chapter unsettles because it does not flatter. It refuses modern innocence and ancient romanticism alike. It speaks to instincts people would rather moralize than examine, and that is why it still provokes. Chapter 19, The Bite of the Adder. Zarathustra now speaks of something small and yet deadly, not a great enemy, not a crushing tragedy, but a bite, sudden, sharp, personal, an insult, a betrayal, a humiliation. Zarathustra knows that it is not great wounds that most often deform the soul. It is small injuries carried too long. He tells the story of a man bitten by an adder. The poison spreads quickly, and the moment demands decision. There is no time for speeches, no time for moral posturing. Zarathustra uses this image to speak about revenge. He sees how instinctively people react when hurt. Pride flares, memory sharpens, the imagination begins rehearsing retaliation. Even when the body is still, the mind strikes back again and again. Zarathustra does not deny this instinct. He examines it. Revenge, he says, is the spirit's way of refusing to let go. It keeps the wound alive. It gives the injury a future. It turns a moment into a destiny. Those who cannot forget cannot grow. Zarathustra does not preach forgiveness as moral duty. He despises hollow virtue. He does not say forgive because it is good. He asks a harder question. Does this injury deserve your future? Revenge feels powerful, but it is reactive. It hands control to the offender. Your emotions, thoughts, and actions orbit around a single moment of harm. This is weakness disguised as strength. Zarathustra says, the noble soul reacts quickly and then moves on. The ignoble soul broods. It cultivates resentment like a garden. The adder's bite teaches urgency. If poison enters, act, but do not worship the wound. Zarathustra warns against moralizing injury. People often turn pain into identity. They gather sympathy. They tell the story again and again. What begins as injustice becomes self-definition. This is dangerous because it freezes becoming. Zarathustra says pride often hides behind vengeance. Not wounded dignity, but fragile ego. The desire to restore one's image matters more than healing. He sees how people confuse justice with revenge. Justice seeks balance. Revenge seeks satisfaction. Zarathustra is clear. Revenge never satisfies. It only prolongs. He also warns against suppressing anger without understanding it. Bottled resentment does not disappear. It mutates. It becomes bitterness, cruelty, or self-contempt. The answer is not denial. It is mastery. Zarathustra wants strength that can endure insult without being defined by it. A spirit that chooses its battles and refuses most. He says something unsettling. Some injuries should be shrugged off, not forgiven. Forgiveness still binds you to the offender. Indifference frees you. This is not weakness. It is sovereignty. Zarathustra also speaks of pride. Healthy pride protects dignity. Wounded pride demands revenge. The difference lies in abundance. The strong person has enough self-worth to let insults fall. The weak must respond because silence feels like erasure. Zarathustra ends this chapter with restraint. Do not seek revenge. Do not cultivate resentment. Do not turn wounds into stories. Treat the bite. Let the poison pass. And continue becoming. Because the one who cannot forget injury cannot create future. Chapter 20. Child and Marriage. Zarathustra now turns toward one of the most intimate and misunderstood subjects of all: marriage and the creation of life. But once again, he does not speak in the language of sentiment, romance, or social expectation. And he does not approach marriage as a moral institution or a sacred tradition handed down by society. Instead, he approaches it as a question of creation, future, and responsibility, asking not whether marriage makes people happy, but whether it makes them stronger, whether it serves becoming rather than comfort, and whether it justifies itself by what it brings into existence. Zarathustra begins by confronting the shallow reasons people seek marriage: loneliness, fear of solitude, desire for validation, social pressure, habit, or the hope that another person will complete what they themselves have not built. He sees these motivations as symptoms of weakness rather than readiness, because marriage entered from need becomes a shelter against emptiness instead of a force of creation. And what is built from lack rarely endures without resentment. Zarathustra is ruthless here, insisting that two halves do not make a whole, that emptiness multiplied does not produce fullness, and that those who seek marriage to escape themselves only succeed in trapping themselves with another witness to their own incompleteness. For him, marriage is not an escape from solitude, but a test of strength. And only those who have learned to stand alone are capable of standing together without collapsing into dependency. He asks whether those who marry have first learned to obey themselves, whether they have forged discipline, direction, and purpose, because without self-mastery, union becomes mutual imprisonment disguised as love. Zarathustra then introduces the central idea of the chapter: the child as justification. Marriage, in his view, finds its highest meaning not in pleasure or companionship, but in creation that extends beyond the present. And the child is not merely a biological outcome, but a symbol of the future, of values carried forward, of strength translated into time. He does not speak sentimentally of children as innocent angels or emotional comforts, but as burdens of responsibility, as living consequences of who the parents truly are. He asks whether those who wish to marry have something worthy to pass on, not merely in blood, but in spirit, asking whether they carry within them discipline, courage, honesty, and the will to grow. Because a child magnifies what already exists, turning hidden flaws into visible realities and unfinished souls into unstable foundations. Zarathustra sees reproduction without responsibility as a kind of betrayal of the future, where people create life not out of abundance, but out of instinct, habit, or boredom, never stopping to ask what kind of existence they are imposing on another being. He is especially critical of those who romanticize marriage while avoiding its consequences, those who want intimacy without duty, pleasure without sacrifice, and legacy without effort. For Zarathustra, the question is always forward-looking. Does this union serve the future or merely soothe the present? He warns against marriages formed from passion alone, calling passion a flame that burns hot but briefly, capable of igniting creation, but incapable of sustaining it without structure, discipline, and shared purpose. Passion without direction leads not to growth, but to exhaustion, disappointment, and quiet resentment, where lovers slowly punish one another for the fatting of feelings that were never meant to carry the weight of a lifetime. Zarathustra does not reject love, but he refuses to idolize it, seeing love as raw energy that must be shaped by, well, if it is to become something durable, something capable of supporting the long labor of creation. He speaks harshly of those who marry too early, before they have become themselves, calling such unions experiments conducted on another soul, where two unfinished beings gamble with each other's futures in the hope that together they will somehow arrive at completion. Instead, Zarathustra insists that one must first become worthy of solitude, because solitude reveals strength, direction, and self-command, and only those who can endure their own company without distraction are capable of sharing life without losing themselves. Marriage, then, is not the merging of identities, but the meeting of two strong paths that walk alongside one another without dissolving into confusion. He speaks of equality, not in the sense of sameness, but in mutual respect between strengths, where neither partner seeks to dominate nor to disappear, where each recognizes the other as a force rather than an accessory. Zarathustra also challenges the idea that marriage should guarantee happiness, suggesting instead that it should demand growth, and that growth is often uncomfortable, requiring sacrifice, endurance, and honest confrontation with one's limitations. He is clear that marriage entered for comfort will fail when discomfort inevitably arrives, whereas marriage entered for creation understands struggle as part of the task rather than a sign of mistake. The child in this framework is not a possession or extension of ego, but a test of values, a living mirror that reflects the parents' discipline, courage, and coherence. And Zarathustra warns that those who have not learned to command themselves will attempt to command the child, turning authority into control and guidance into repression. He sees how often people attempt to correct in their children what they refuse to confront in themselves, using morality as a weapon rather than as an example. And he condemns this as hypocrisy disguised as care. Zarathustra's vision of parenthood is severe but honest, To create life is to accept responsibility for shaping a future that may judge you more harshly than any critic. Because children do not listen to what is said, they absorb what is lived. He insists that one must ask not whether one wants a child, but whether one can endure the task of becoming better for the sake of that child. Because the future demands more than instinct, it demands intention. Throughout the chapter, Zarathustra returns again and again to the idea of overcoming, emphasizing that marriage and parenthood are not ends in themselves, but arenas where self-overcoming is either achieved or avoided. They either sharpen character or expose its absence. He rejects the sentimental idea that love excuses weakness, arguing instead that true love demands strength, because only strength can give without draining, guide without dominating, and endure without bitterness. Zarathustra closes this reflection by reminding the listener that marriage is not sacred by tradition, but must justify itself by what it creates. That the child is not a guarantee of meaning, but a question posed to the parents' lives, and that the future does not forgive carelessness, because what is created must live with the consequences long after passion has faded and promises have been forgotten. In this way, child and marriage stands as one of Zarathustra's most demanding teachings, stripping away romantic illusions and replacing them with responsibility, asking not what marriage gives to the individual, but what the individual gives to the future, and whether they are strong enough to bear the weight of creation without hiding behind love, tradition, or instinct. Chapter 21, Voluntary Death. Zarathustra now approaches one of the most easily misunderstood teachings in the entire book, and he does so with gravity rather than spectacle. Because voluntary death is not an invitation to self-destruction, nor a praise of despair, but a meditation on dignity, timing, and responsibility toward life itself, asking not how one should die, but how one should live so fully that death is no longer feared, postponed, or clung to as an escape. Zarathustra speaks against deaths that arrive accidentally, mechanically, or passively, lives that drag on long after their inner fire has been extinguished, where existence becomes habit rather than creation. And he is equally critical of deaths born from resentment, exhaustion, or revenge against life. For him, both extremes represent a failure to take responsibility for one's existence. He sees many people dying too late, not biologically, but spiritually, lingering in routines, clinging to comfort, preserving themselves long after they have ceased to grow. And he sees others wishing for death too early, not because they have completed their task, but because they have not yet found the courage to begin it. Against both, Zarathustra introduces the idea of voluntary death as affirmation rather than negation, a stance toward mortality that arises from fullness, not emptiness. To live voluntarily, he suggests, is to live with awareness that life is finite and therefore precious, that every act is chosen rather than inherited, and that death is not an enemy stalking from outside, but a boundary that gives shape to meaning. Zarathustra refuses the moral language that treats death as taboo or life as sacred by default. Instead, he demands that life justify itself through creation, growth, and contribution, and that death be understood as the final act of responsibility rather than a shameful accident or a desperate protest. He speaks critically of those who cling to life at any cost, not out of love for existence, but out of fear, habit, or dependency, turning survival into an idle and mistaking mere continuation for purpose. Such clinging, he argues, drains life of dignity, transforming it into endurance without direction. Yet he is equally dismissive of those who fantasize about death as release, who romanticize disappearance instead of confronting the hard labor of becoming. For Zarathustra, this is not courage, but exhaustion dressed up as philosophy. True voluntary death, as he frames it, is inseparable from voluntary life. One must first learn to say yes to existence, to shape it actively, to accept struggle as the price of creation, before one can speak meaningfully about its end. He urges the listener to live in such a way that death does not arrive as a thief, but as a conclusion, not because one has withdrawn from the world, but because one has given what one had to give. This teaching challenges both religious consolation and modern avoidance, rejecting the promise of another world as well as the denial of mortality altogether, insisting instead that meaning is forged here, in time, through action. Zarathustra speaks of dying at the right time, not as a literal schedule, but as an inner measure, the sense that one's energies are spent not in decay, but in completion, that one's influence now belongs to the future rather than the present. He contrasts this with lives that end resentful, filled with unfinished bitterness, where death arrives as interruption rather than closure. The voluntary stance toward death, he insists, transforms how one lives. It sharpens priorities, strips away trivial attachments, and demands honesty about what truly matters. Because when one no longer hides behind illusions of endless time, excuses lose their power. Zarathustra also speaks to compassion here, warning against a pity that keeps others alive without purpose, that prolongs suffering not out of care, but out of fear of letting go. And he asks whether such pity serves life or merely preserves decay. This is not a call to abandon the vulnerable, but a call to distinguish between supporting growth and maintaining stagnation. He urges each individual to ask themselves whether they are living in preparation for life or merely in avoidance of death, because the latter produces neither joy nor strength, only anxiety disguised as responsibility. Throughout the chapter, Zarathustra returns to the theme of sovereignty, the idea that a mature spirit neither begs life for meaning nor curses it for pain, but takes ownership of both, shaping existence as an artwork whose value lies not in its duration, but in its intensity and coherence. Death, then, becomes part of that artwork, not something to hasten or flee, but something acknowledged, integrated, and ultimately respected as the boundary that makes creation urgent. He speaks gently but firmly against despair, reminding the listener that those who speak most loudly of death often do so because they have not yet learned how to live, because life has not yet been claimed as a task rather than endured as a burden. Zarathustra's voice here is not that of a judge, but of a physician, diagnosing a culture that either hides death behind false comfort or exploits it as spectacle, and offering instead a path of maturity that looks mortality in the face without flinching. The chapter closes not with instruction, but with challenge. To live so consciously, so creatively, and so responsibly that when death does arrive, whenever and however that may be, it does not negate one's life, but completes it, leaving behind not resentment or regret, but influence, example, and continuity in others. In this sense, voluntary death is ultimately a chapter about life at its highest intensity, a refusal to waste time, a refusal to drift, and a refusal to surrender meaning to either fear or fantasy, asking each reader not to seek death, but to live as if their days truly mattered, because only such a life can face its end without bitterness. Chapter 22, The Bestowing Virtue. Zarathustra now reaches the culmination of part 1, and his voice changes, becoming neither confrontational nor corrective, but generous. Because the bestowing virtue is not about restraint or rejection, but about abundance, about what happens when strength has matured enough to give without needing recognition, repayment, or moral applause. And he begins by distinguishing between virtues that are taught and virtues that overflow, between those practiced out of obedience and those that arise naturally from a full and disciplined life. Zarathustra is suspicious of virtues that demand constant self-denial, sacrifice, and guilt, because such virtues often serve weakness rather than strength, teaching people to feel righteous about their restraint while remaining inwardly impoverished. He sees how moral systems praise those who suppress desire without ever transforming it, producing individuals who appear virtuous on the surface, but are inwardly tense, resentful, and judgmental. And he calls this a hidden sickness, because what is repressed seeks expression elsewhere, often through condemnation of others. Against this, Zarathustra introduces the idea of the bestowing virtue, a virtue that does not arise from fear of punishment or hope of reward, but from overflow, from a life so rich in meaning, discipline, and self-command that generosity becomes inevitable rather than forced. Such a virtue does not ask, "What should I give?" but simply gives, as a tree gives fruit, not to prove its goodness, but because ripeness demands release. Zarathustra emphasizes that this form of giving is not altruism in the sentimental sense. It is not self-erasure, nor is it charity that humiliates the receiver. Instead, it is an affirmation of one's own strength, a sharing of energy, insight, courage, or example that empowers rather than weakens those who receive it. He warns against giving that seeks gratitude, calling it disguised bargaining, and against giving that seeks moral superiority, calling it disguised domination. insisting that true bestowing asks nothing in return, and therefore does not bind either party in debt. This virtue, he says, is rare because it requires individuals to first overcome themselves, to conquer resentment, insecurity, and the need for approval, all of which poison generosity at its root. Zarathustra connects the bestowing virtue to creativity, arguing that the highest form of giving is not instruction or command, but example, the silent transmission of values through lived coherence, because people learn more from what one embodies than from what one preaches. He speaks of the Creator who gives not rules, but possibilities, who opens paths rather than demanding followers, and who understands that influence is strongest when it is indirect, when it invites rather than coerces. Zarathustra also warns that the bestowing virtue must know its limits, because giving indiscriminately can exhaust even the strong, turning abundance into depletion. And he insists that one must give from surplus, not from core. Otherwise, generosity becomes self-betrayal. This balance, he suggests, is the mark of maturity. Knowing when to give, how much to give, and when to withhold, not out of stinginess, but out of responsibility to one's own becoming. He rejects the idea that virtue should be universalized into law, because what overflows from one individual may not exist in another, and to demand identical generosity from all is to misunderstand the nature of strength itself. Instead, he celebrates diversity of virtues, each shaped by temperament, path, and purpose, unified only by the principle of self-overcoming. Zarathustra's tone here is almost joyful, because the bestowing virtue represents liberation from moral anxiety, from constant self-surveillance, and from the exhausting question of whether one is good enough, replacing it with the quieter certainty of action aligned with inner necessity. He speaks of joy as the companion of such virtue, not pleasure or amusement, but the deep satisfaction that arises when one's energies flow outward in harmony with one's values. This joy does not need witnesses, applause, or justification. It is self-validating, like a melody that completes itself by being played. As the chapter draws toward its close, Zarathustra reflects on his own teaching, acknowledging that even his words are a form of giving, offered not to create disciples, but to awaken creators. And he reminds his listeners that his highest hope is not obedience, but independence, not agreement, but growth. He encourages them to take what nourishes them and discard the rest, because true generosity respects freedom rather than binding it. In this final movement of part 1, Zarathustra leaves the listener with a vision of life guided not by fear, guilt, or obligation, but by abundance, discipline, and creative responsibility, where virtue is not a burden carried reluctantly, but a force that moves naturally outward, shaping the world quietly and without resentment. The bestowing virtue, he concludes, is the mark of a life that has learned to affirm itself so completely that it can afford to give, not because it must, but because it has become what it is. In this video, we completed part 1 of Thus Spoke Zarathustra, moving through its final, and most demanding teachings. We explored desire and illusion and the dangers of unconscious power. We faced injury and revenge and the strength required to move forward without resentment. We examined marriage and creation, asking what we owe to the future. We reflected on death, not as escape, but as responsibility toward life. And finally, we arrived at the bestowing virtue, the ideal of giving from strength, not obligation. Together, these chapters ask a single, serious question. Is your life driven by fear and habit, or by creation, discipline, and abundance? Part 1 is now complete, but Zarathustra's journey is only beginning. In Part 2, the tone changes. The challenges grow sharper, the illusions fall harder, and the cost of becoming oneself becomes impossible to ignore. If this series has resonated with you, explore the earlier videos on this channel and stay with Whispers of Wisdom as we continue deeper into this extraordinary work.